Hey, hey, Shorties! Welcome, welcome. Do you like the new additions to the intro? Adam's been messing around with his newest skill and in his video editing tool belt and has created us some cool flags. So they look amazing, huh? Thank you all for being here. Who have we got in the house? We've got Taryn, we've got Debbie, Ernie Birdie, Turd, Miss Jess, Danny's here, Amy, Backseat Jura, Simply Bell. Hey, y'all, everybody. It's so good to see you all. It's a very special. Oh, Jules is in the house. Good to see you, darling. Thank you for being here. Yes. Well, also, you might notice there's a very special background that Adam and I put together in honor of, I guess, Abby and Libby, and also to highlight Rick Allen's plight, which is kind of what we're going to do here this evening. Tracy Kay's in the house. Good to see you, Tracy, girl. Yes, Laurie Life 360, Rachel, Lulu's here. Good to see you, girl. If I miss anybody, I'm sorry, but I would like to get started with our amazing guests. Yes, you heard it. Bob Motta, Defense Diaries, fangirling hard, trying to remain composed, is here. And also his lovely, delightful, amazing, badass wife, Ali, is backstage. So without further ado, let me bring them both on. We're talking Delphi. Bob, good to see you.
Hey.
Oh, hey.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Preparing for a very warm day in here in Melbourne. It's going to be your equivalent of about 95. So,
ooh, what?
Yikes!
Yeah, we're deep in the throes of fall now by us. So it's a nice. Say it's like 56 out. It's nice. It's nice. I love fall. I love the color changes and the temperature is very comfortable to me. So yeah, we're deep in fall. Chicago's weird though. We get like a week of fall and then it turns right into winter. So yeah, it gets cold and snowy pretty quick. But actually, the past few years it hasn't been quite as snowy. So
maybe this winter will be the one. Yikes.
Yeah. I like it at first, and then I get to the point where I don't like it. It's like I like it when the snow falls, but then when it becomes gets just blacked out from the cars driving and slushy, then I'm like, I'm good. Like I'm ready for summer. So it's like I want like a week of winter, unless I'm going to ski somewhere. So
yes.
So hey to everybody in the chat. I see all your beautiful humans over here. Hey, what's up, y'all? Good to see you.
Yes, this is my Shorties crew. I presume we might build a few more people along the way. We'll gather some rolling Shorties as they start to roll in. But without further ado, shall we bring up your glorious wife, Mrs. Ali Motta? Hi, Ali.
Hi all.
Hey, babe.
Hi. I entertained the idea of wearing my Team Ali t-shirt tonight. I didn't wear it because I didn't want to offend Bob, but needless to say, it's a favorite and in the closet. So
all right,
that does not offend me. It's quite the opposite of offending me. I love to see that. So nobody's a bigger fan of Ali than I am. I promise you that.
As it should be, Bob, and you know all the right things to say. Heartfelt, I'm sure. Absolutely, she's 100%. A cool chick.
She is the goods.
So, Bob, you've had quite the couple of years with this case, quite the last month, and then quite the week. Could we start with you, please, just because you're in court every day?
Yep.
Disclaimer, not as a member of the defense team.
Not as a member of the defense team, no.
Let's dispel that straight from the jump. As a guest of Rick's wife, Kathy, correct?
Correct. Yep.
But could you give us a bit of a set the mood for the courtroom, the courthouse? I know you weren't part of the line sitting thing, but the whole vibe,
yeah,
so
I was
detached sort of feel.
fortunate. Yeah, I was very fortunate to not be part of the line sitting thing. So, yeah, I mean, Delphi is just a small town, you know, kind of the courthouse sits in the center of town. Kind of everything revolves around it. You've got just like a typical American small town square that has like the heart of it is that courthouse, and you've got your restaurants and little shops around it. And, you know, every day outside of there was that line of people that were wanting to get in, and then you had just onlookers. So there was always a buzz around the courthouse, and then you'd get into the courtroom, and it was always the decorum was always maintained. It was never getting loud. There was never any kind of bickering going on. It was just what you'd expect in a courtroom. You know, it's so you have the trappings of the court. Decorum must be maintained. You know, I'm obviously a longtime lawyer, so we're very respectful of that. And everybody that was in there was very respectful of it. You know, and it's hard because you have, you know, grieving families over there that are hoping for justice. You've got Kathy Allen and Jan Allen and the Allen family hoping for justice in their eyes. You know, so it's the stakes just don't get any higher, you know, at that type of situation. It's all you can feel the weight of it in a courtroom much more than you can watching it on a stream. It's just you can't really duplicate what it feels like to be in the courtroom and just feeling the trappings of the court surrounding you, and just like the weight of it all is much different in real life. And it was unusual for me. That was the first time I'd ever, like, Ali and I would occasionally pop in on a trial, maybe for like 10 minutes when one was going on in the courthouse. But in terms of like sitting on that side of the bar, as opposed to being in the well of the courtroom, it was a very different experience. I enjoyed it, but I hated it at the same time. I hated that I was like forced to have to transcribe as much as I could, because you're missing observing things in the courtroom because you're sitting there looking at a pad of paper as opposed to being able to watch the witness, you know, and kind of what's going on. And you're trying to watch the jury, and you get to, you know, so you lose a little of that when you're forced to do what I was forced to do and what Andrea and Lee were forced to do. But, you know, it was for the team. It was for the sacrifice. It was the world deserved to know exactly what was going on as best as we could transcribe it. And I think all three of us did the best that we could. So, but yeah, it was a wild experience to be on the other side of it, just kind of observing for sure.
Ali, I want to ask you in just a moment about, because you were there one day, but before I go on, I was wondering how your hands coped with all of that note taking. Are you a righty or a lefty? And how many pens did you go through? Bob.
Oh, me. Yeah. My hand.
Bob. I'm going to get Ali next.
I still haven't gotten full feeling back in this tip of my index finger, like seriously. So it was like numb, completely numb. I went through one legal pad, and then when I went to go buy more at the CVS where Rick actually worked,
yes,
I ended up, they didn't have them, so I went to those kind of old school composite notebooks that you used to get like in high school. So I bought like 3 of those. I burned through those 3. Ali went out and got me a bunch of notebooks, and she got me like kind of bigger notebooks where you'd flip the page over, and they were pretty thick. And I went through 2 of those. So it was a lot. And there was one day I had forgotten one of my notebooks. I had to go front and back on the front and back page on the composite notebook. So it was a ton. I mean, I basically transcribed the whole trial as best as I could. And it would be hard, like towards the end of the day, I'd just like lose steam And, you know, and it's also hard, like when there's a really interesting kind of back and forth going, like my lawyer brain is like wanting to just kind of focus on what they're saying. And like I'd forget to write things down because I was so like just encapsulated in what was going on in front of me that it would be, you know, I'd be able to think, oh my God. And so then I'd be 2 questions behind trying to remember what the person said to write that down. Then, so I was constantly behind unless, so I was always happy when they'd have a sidebar and they'd put the white noise on and go into the corner because that would allow me like 5 minutes to catch up the best that I could. Or I'd turn around and ask Andrea, I'm like, what did they ask? Like, what was the answer? She can write very quickly. So she
Yes.
had she had a great advantage. Like I am not. And plus, I knew Ali was doing like daytime lives. So I was trying to write as neatly as humanly possible, which just slows me down even more. So it was challenging, but you know, I wouldn't have it any other way. Like the world needed to know what's going on in there. So
Absolutely. Ali, you went to court one day, and I caught quite a few of your daytime lives.
Oh, hey, Lisa, before you jump in, I'm sorry to interrupt. I got to go run my daughter to softball. Allie's going to hang with you. And as soon as I get back, I'll come back on y'all. All right.
Perfect. Safe driving, Bob.
All right. Okay. Bye.
Thank you. So, Ali, you were there one day, and I did catch some of your lives just with the time difference. I did notice you were at times sort of a little perplexed by what Bob meant from his notes, or because, you know, when you write something, you kind of know what you're thinking, and it's hard to then translate, even though you've been married for a couple of decades. So how did you find being the voice at the microphone through the day with Bob in court?
Well, there was a couple of times where it's like, because also if you're writing it and you know what it was about, you may not need to spell certain things out. So there was several times that I realized after the fact, oh, I was so wrong about what I thought this meant, and then what I was saying, that I was like, I can't even remember what those things are now, but I was like, I remember thinking one point, should I call Darren, like he's our producer, and figure out if he can take that part out, or, you know. So it was I didn't mind doing it, and I liked kind of doing it, and I was anxious to hear like what was going on anyway, but it's not helpful when there's certain things that I've misinterpreted that he wrote, or not being able to see it was hard. And then there were certain days that it was like worse than others. The first time I did it was kind of horrible. It was the opening and the closing, and I almost never wanted to do it again, but
But you soldiered on. And also it would have been tricky because obviously Bob was in court, and whilst in court, he had a couple of moments to shoot you through a text message, I guess, maybe send you an email with however you that looked like for you guys. And then he was back in the courtroom, and so couldn't clarify anything for you. Must have been quite stressful for both of you.
Yes.
And so you were there in court one day, that's right?
Well, I went before the openings, so there wasn't obviously anything that happened that day, and then one actual court day. Yep.
How did you find it? Were you spirited in with Bob, or did you have to
I think it was because Bob wasn't there. So the whole reason I ended up in Delphi was because we were supposed to go to a true crime podcast festival in and I can't remember where, but I think the East Coast somewhere. But so we were supposed to fly out on Friday after court, but then Bob realized he shouldn't miss Saturday. So he's like, one of us needs to go. I'm like, I am not doing your true crime podcast with like all your friends. I mean, and I know a lot of those friends, but still, I'm like, plus, like when we do those things, I just kind of sit at the table until somebody wants to say something to me. And I mean, sometimes I'll be like, oh, have you heard this? But I don't do it like Bob does. He's like the people person, sales, way more good at like just wrangling people in. So it was definitely better that he goes. So since he wasn't there, I went. And that was a half a day. So it was much, much easier than what he needs to do. And that, I think, was the day that I met, but maybe I was there more than that. maybe I was there 2 days. I think no, because that's the day that I met Kathy Allen, uh, like, for the first time, obviously, and then, it was just kinda surreal. I was trying to watch the jury a lot. Like, anytime that I thought there was a good point, I was looking at the jury, and then I was making a note, like, which juror seemed to make a face, or this one's taking a lot of notes, but yeah, it was definitely interesting, and it's no easier to read a jury when you're watching them than because when we're doing trial, I almost never look at the jury unless I am addressing the jury. Even if I'm questioning a witness, it would be weird for me to like look over, to the jury. But during openings and closings, yeah, obviously. Um, but yeah, it was interesting, and like I said, no easier to read them sitting there in front of them.
Did you in your day there and noticing the jury, did you think anybody stood out to you? I know you can't really tell from appearances who might have been selected as the foreperson, and then were you perhaps surprised by who they chose amongst
So
themselves?
Bob was surprised, and if he's describing it, I guess I'm surprised as well. Like, I noticed the 2 girls that were, in the lower of the row, like, they seemed to have piled up very quickly, and they were, like, talking, and there was, the guy in the back who on the end, who took notes. That day I was there, he was taking a lot of notes, and he was also looking around, at the crowd, and that's why I think there was a second day that I was there. um, and it must have been that Monday. Right, right, right. Because I was gonna we were both gonna go home. So he did take a lot of notes, and he looked out at the crowd a lot. And then I suggested to Bob that maybe we should suggest the family shift over, because I thought maybe the jurors are looking for the family. Like, does this man have any support? But then I realized that they were choosing to sit there he so Richard Allen could see them, so
Ah,
they and that's what they like, because if they would have sat where I was thinking, he he would have had to turn, like, all the way around to
yes.
look at him, because they would have been kinda behind him, and they were sort of diagonal, so he could look over at Kathy. But the guy that ended up being the foreman was between another guy. So there was the guy that took all the notes on the end and that I saw looking out a lot, and the guy next to one chair over from him who took a lot of notes as well. And there was one time I was shocked. They were all talking. Like, it was, during like one of the white noise things. They're all talking to each other, and like it looked like they're looking at each other's notes. And I was like, what is like, is this allowed? Like, what is going on? Because I'm just so used to jurors can't talk about anything the whole time, like, and you're never supposed to share your notes, never.
No.
So for one of them to ask the other one what they had in their notes, that just meant they all got whatever that person said, and you have no idea if they got it right, which is why they tell people don't share your notes, because then one person wrote it down and it's wrong, everybody's mind gets shifted to that. Um, but I didn't really the guy in between those 2, he seemed sort of nondescript. So, yeah, that's who Bob described as being the foreman. Uh, I guess
Interesting.
not surprising really, because what do you know from people just sitting there, but not one of the more, active people that I noticed.
Sure. Jules wonders, what was the age range of the jurors? Did you sort of take a bit of
Yeah,
a
there were several older women, and then there was, like, I think there were the 2 that I said kinda piled up, that they were younger, and I think there was someone in the back that was younger, but one of the I think just 1, maybe 2, because I know one of the older women ended up being an alternate. um, and then the men, if I remember correctly, all seemed to be sort of middle age. I don't remember anybody being particularly young. That guy that ended up being the foreman might have been a little older than the others, but I can't even really picture his face. But I do remember thinking there were quite a few older women. Um, and older to me has got to be over 55, because and that'll keep moving as I age. So
Yes, yes, when
Bob's
I think of
55,
young,
so
it's
old has
yeah.
gotta be above that.
And when I think of young, I think like someone who's 35. I'm like, oh, you're just a baby.
Right. And I think the ones I'm calling younger were like 40s or 50s, and the other ones are. So there was no one that was, I don't think, below 40 on there, but I could be completely wrong. I didn't really get a full on view of anybody.
Yes. I've just got someone's just Romy, sorry, not someone. Romy is I missed it coming through. Romy's got a super chat. Thank you so much, Romy, for that. I should say $20 holla, to use a Bobism. I remember when he first started saying that, and you started joining him on his lives on YouTube, Ali. And you were like, I don't want to say that, and also, aw, family
Right.
hug.
Yeah.
Oh goodness.
AJ.
I might save that one, Romy, for when Bob gets back. Just because it's a bit of a glowing compliment to Defense Diaries as a whole. So we'll
Oh,
wait for that one. Yes. So Ali, you spent some time talking with Andrea and lawyer Lee, on the roundtable while Verdict Watch was on, and it was quite a fabulous discussion. I thoroughly enjoyed it. The thing that interests me, and I feel like it probably gave Bob pause as well, which he mentioned on his chat with Preeti Tragos, but the jury questions, that's not something that happens in Chicago or in Illinois as a whole. You changed your not stance on that, but your kind of thoughts on that during that roundtable.
Yeah, because from a lawyer's perspective, it's a good thing. It gives you, it tells you all the like, it gives you a little hint. What do they need? What are they thinking? So it's like, oh yeah, give me the questions. Like I was all for it. But when Lee put it in that way, which was, if someone's asking a question, they might be asking it sort of to confirm something for themselves, or to prove themselves right about something, or to make a point. And then that point, it's like one, and that maybe that sort of digs in and has them, feeling like they're going to stick with that because it was like their question and their point, that it might be something to hard mentally, like not like a conscious thing, like, well, I'm standing behind my question kind of thing, but like a subconscious sort of, reassurance, self, it's affirming what they thought, that maybe maybe questions aren't good, but every lawyer loves that concept. There's not, it could end up being better for that other lawyer, but it's still, like for your opposing counsel than it is for you, depending on the question, but it's still giving you something with each and every question. But yeah, that
And
definitely
from what
made
I
me
understand,
think.
yes, from what I understand, there was some pretty insightful, very helpful questions from the jurors. When you were there that day, Ali, were there any questions that you thought, oh wow, great question?
There definitely was. I can't remember what it was, but I just remember that when I was so impressed with the questions, and there was, I can't remember the one where it was like, wow, if they didn't ask that, I think it was like, how long does it take to get across the bridge? That was one of the questions they asked when we were there. And then I was hoping that they saw that this guy just, like, they just tried to pull the wool over their eyes, because he had said you could do it in 9 minutes was the answer, like, or that was maybe the question, can you do it in 9 minutes? And then the
Mhm.
defense got up and they um kind of circled back, and then you realize, no, that's a 20-minute walk unless you're really trying to walk faster, that would kind of show them that they're getting a biased person's opinion. And then I was like, when no one asked, do you recognize this person, to any of the witnesses, I'm starting to think those were the questions that weren't allowed to be asked. Now, the defense isn't going to do it typically because, God forbid, the person says, "Yeah, I think it looked like him." So when neither side is doing it, it's because they're both afraid of the answer. Um, I was most surprised with Betsy Blair. I'm pretty sure they deposed her. They had to know what
Yes.
she was going to say. They called her. They're on their own. She's describing someone that looks nothing like him. So why didn't she get asked? And the only thing could be that she might be saying, I don't know, maybe, like because you'd think with her description, the answer would have been no, for sure. So
Because Betsy was the one who said the beautiful man with brown puffy hair, right?
Right. And Bob told me today, and I wasn't sure if I remembered this or if I processed it this way, that Betsy saw the guy on the bridge as the girls were coming on the bridge. So
Mm.
to me, I'm like, but what could her answer have been that she was describing someone in that way? Like, I don't know how she could look at Richard Allen and not be like, no, but I just feel like if that was her answer, then they would have asked that question. Now, I don't know, maybe you don't ask it in deposition because you don't want the answer on record either, but well, yeah, I guess not. I guess you can't risk it because then you do have to give the other side. If I go out and interview someone and never call them and they're like, "Oh, I saw that guy, he killed her." And then I'm never calling that witness. I don't have to give that to the other side. The other side would have to give it to me if they interviewed someone that they weren't going to call and they said, "I saw the guy that killed him and it wasn't him." But if I interview them and I'm calling them, I have to let the state know anything that was said. So maybe they never did ask the question in fear of the answer.
Well, that was what another interesting thing. I think Bob and Andrea both mentioned that of all of the eyewitnesses who testified and who were presumably deposed, neither side, not the state and nor the defense, asked any of those witnesses on the stand, do you see that man in court before you? And I guess that's a risky proposition also, yes, because for the prosecution, if those witnesses say, nope, not him, it's killer.
Right.
Bad choice of words. And if it's and and for the defense, if they say yes, if they ask and they say yes, would you as a defense attorney, would you have asked any of those witnesses?
I mean, the only one I would have contemplated asking would have been Betsy Blair.
Yes,
And
because of her stark different description of that person on the bridge.
right.
Right.
And like I said, initially I was thinking, well, why wouldn't they ask her at a deposition, or they would have asked her at some point? And as I'm thinking about it sitting here, they may have never asked her so that they didn't have to tell the other side if the answer was, yeah, it looks like Richard Allen to me. But uh, because at least if you're the defense, if they aren't going to identify them in court, it's better for you because then you can argue in closing. Everybody sat here. They brought you 4 eyewitnesses. Not one identified him. Not one. So what, like, that's obviously better than if you ask them and they were like, it could have been, I'm not sure. Or obviously it's better than, yeah, it's that guy over there. But if that was their answer, the state would have given it, which begs the question, why didn't the defense get a report from the state of when somebody asked them? Because you got to be certain that the cops asked them, well, do you recognize him? Is this the guy? So I don't know.
I'll just take a pause, Ali, and just mention for those of you coming in late, Bob was here and he will be back. He just had to take, I presume, Scout to softball practice.
Yep.
So he'll be back. He just had to do the dad thing, family first, yes?
Was supposed to be I popped on and left and I did it. And then he's like, no, I want you to stay. So I was like, all right.
I won't be offended, Ali. So how did you, I mean, are you just on a family personal front? Because Bob wasn't, he was in Delphi, right? For the entirety of the trial. How did that go for you, having to run your regular life, your regular family life, and also do the daytime streams? And also, I guess, probably knowing that Bob was like, it's he's deeply invested in this from a personal and a legal. He has an interest, a very long running interest in this case. So how did you feel with that?
I mean, it was fine because it was there was I don't think that I think I had a very easy calendar because I had some motions that I had to get done. So I didn't have to be in court. I did and in the afternoon is usually only hearings, like in-person hearings. So I didn't schedule any over the last 2 weeks, which ended up working for everyone because usually I might have ended up being in court. So it wasn't too hard because the kids were at school anyway. But when he then wanted me to also get on at night, that was a little bit daunting. I was like, all right, well, I'm not going to the market again, you know. So but it was all right. I'd kind of hoped it would take us from like the 25,000 subscribers to 100,000, but it only took us up to like 34. But you know, it is what it is.
Yeah, I guess frustrating that there was from that channel point of view that there were no cameras in court, no live streaming, because Bob could have been there. You could have done the lunchtime stuff from the studio, and
Right.
then in the evening that may well have helped. Bloody Judge Gull putting the spanner in so many works, not least of all justice.
It's like sometimes I try to get into her mind and figure she can't be that like intentional with this. It's just like it doesn't make any sense because it seems so intentional the way she treats the defense and her rulings and her decision to put cameras in the courtroom that one day when she's about to pants them, and I'm like, but she's a judge for God's sakes, and clearly she's been doing this for so many years. Why would she want to undermine justice? It kind of makes no sense. But
It is perplexing.
yeah, but her rulings just during trial, it was hard to see really anything else. And maybe if there was maybe there was words that she could speak where I'd be like, okay, now I see that. But some of them, the to not, she damn well knows that you can bring up anything you want to show bias to a witness and to call it outside of the scope. It just the, there's not any rational possible legal reason. There was a couple things like that where I was like, she knows the law. She's a judge. What the hell is happening? But I don't know.
I think the other thing that, from my understanding, that stood out with those kind of rulings was her rulings on impeaching or refreshing the witness's recollection on things, and it literally from question to question, a different objection. I think McClelland objected to the reading of the question, and then in the next breath objected to it not being read from the transcript. So that's that's right there in plain sight.
Right, and I know one time on Bob's live or from his notes. No, I think from his live, I was so confused. I was like, wait a minute, there is a legal something that has been lost here. I'm like, something happened. And he was on another live. So I called Andrea and I was like, what can you explain to me? Like what happened? And it was about that impeachment and refreshing the recollection. And she said, like, he literally did it textbook. And that they wanted it was for impeachment, and they wanted him to first try to refresh his recollection, which legally you don't have to do. You have to confront someone like, did you have a conversation with Allison on June 5th? Yeah. And you guys talked about some sort of general topic, right? Libby and Abby. Yeah. And during that conversation, did you say, like, once they acknowledge that they remember the conversation and then deny it, then that's it. That's impeachment. So I don't know. I don't know what went down with that, but I know that Andrea was in there and said that it was like textbook perfect and there was absolutely no reason why she would do it. And then it's not the first time that I've seen I make an objection, the prosecution, the judge overrules it. I get the exact same I mean, they make an objection. The the judge sustains it, then I make the exact same objection and the judge overrules it. It's like, it's not the first time that's happened for sure.
Yes. So it's interesting then that those really, even from a non-attorney, which I obviously am not. I consider myself a law nerd, but I don't know shit about shit really. But you would think that the jurors would have smelt that something stank in that courtroom with that stuff. That's really blatant. Do you have any thoughts on?
I thought that as well, but it's like, you get in there with the trappings of the courtroom, and like the judge, it's like, ah, so when she says something is overruled, you hope that they can see they're shutting something down. They're not, like, that's what my mind wants to see. Like, they've got to see that they're smart. But the other side of your mind that you're not contemplating is they just might be seeing, well, the defense did that wrong again. Well, the defense tried to get something in they weren't supposed to again. Oh, the defense tried to shut him up from saying that again. So I think that there's a lot more of that than we like to think, because of the whole trappings of the courtroom and just assuming the judge is the judge. The judge knows. The judge isn't going to be just trying to screw somebody over. So I don't know.
I guess there's that same sort of mindset about, well, Richard Allen was arrested. They wouldn't have arrested him had they not had some probable cause beyond the scant pickings that the probable cause affidavit delivered, and also, in my opinion, the evidence presented. So I guess that kind of all wraps into the same kind of mindset of a bit of confirmation bias that, well, she's the judge and we're in the courtroom and the police arrest the bad guys, and so he must be the bad guy.
For sure. Absolutely.
It's concerning. So how surprised were you by the verdict?
I was very surprised. And I was surprised that there wasn't more, like, even if they were going to get there to a guilty verdict, I was surprised there wasn't first a deadlock, that, no questions, about the law, unless there was stuff going on that we don't know about. But I think that all the people sitting outside of the courthouse would have seen the lawyers rush in. However, they do have an entrance on the back, but I know, at least the days that I was there, that's where, like, the press would be sitting, or the cameramen waiting for people to come out. There's usually like someone back there, but almost never the people that are like waiting, unless they were waiting in the, because I never saw a line or anything, because Bob and I always showed up like 10 minutes before. So I don't know where they were waiting, but there's a side entrances. So it is possible they were going in for questions, and we the people just don't know it. I think if it had been deadlocked, we would have heard that. I don't know, but I was surprised. And like today, I was just trying to convince myself, all right, you know what? Maybe he did do it, like that. Maybe it did work. And I was trying to come up with ways to make it that maybe he did do it, because it's so horrible to think, two horribles. Whoever did this to these girls is still out there, and then that an innocent man now, goes to prison for the rest of his life. It's, like, the whole reason you become a defense attorney is because you firmly believe one innocent man in prison is worse than 100 guilty people going free.
It's sickening. I know myself, when the verdict was handed down and I heard the news, like, I felt extremely somber and sad and kind of like nauseous for all of that. I was interested or horrified that while they said it would be 2 hours from when they heard the jury had reached a verdict to when the verdict was delivered, and then by all accounts it was announced that it was to be delivered, the verdict was to read out at 3 p.m, and then they went at about 20 to 3 with the verdict. What's your opinion on that? I have an opinion. What's your opinion on that whole debacle?
I mean, I didn't actually ever put any thought into it, like not thinking of from a conspiracy point of view. It could have been, all right, everyone's here, we might as well just go. But I don't know. I'd be interested to hear what your thoughts are.
So for me, it's very much in the same vein as everything else. Doing stuff without the light of the public shining in, doing things, saying the one thing and then doing another, kind of hamstringing the defense. It just is in a completely the same vein to me. So yeah, I was horrified, and not doing the things that, the due process in court and the way things are done, that all of that is deeply entrenched forever. The law is the law is the law. So to do yet another thing where you say one thing that there's a procedure, this is what the procedure we're going to do, and then to not do it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that could have been the case. You're very accurate that she may have made that decision in anticipation that everyone and their mother would be flooding in at 3 o'clock. So we go early, we get done early, everybody gets out, and haha, that definitely could have been the reasoning as well.
I mean, obviously we're speculating, but it just it just fit with the general theme of the way Judge Gull has sort of handled the whole thing, even with the cameras in the courtroom, which obviously never happened except for that one day, as you mentioned before, when she was planning to pull the rug out from underneath the defense team, and did.
Right. And that's just the kind of thing that's so blatant and in your face that it makes me, like I've said it before, like it's like that we've got a series here in the States, Your Honor, where the
Yes.
judge, yeah. So it makes me think of that, because it's like, all right, that's really, blatantly obvious. And I don't know, sometimes I'm thinking, are judges feeling empowered by our Supreme Court because they like everyone and their mother has always said you can't, Roe versus Wade can never be overturned based on our legal precedent and stare decisis, and like you just can't do it. And then they just go off and do whatever they want that flies in the face of the entire procedure, like all the laws that they've ever said, just because on this one reason they want to. I don't know, maybe it's making judges feel empowered to do whatever the hell they want.
Absolutely. Actually, let me see. I think, yeah, Lulu Unlocked said, I don't understand, if every standard job has higher ups with sanctions for not working correctly, how do judges keep getting away with jail at doing whatever the heck they want? I don't think jail is the right word, but yes.
It's crazy. I had a situation where a judge, I felt, was out of control. Like, she was challenging me in front of the jury, and I said something to her. I said, Your Honor, not in front of the jury, obviously. I'm like, you can't address me down like that in front of the jury. You're damaging the defense by giving them the sense that you're belittling me. Like, I was, so I took issue with that and I confronted her on it. But then, so in federal courts, you can't have your phones no pictures, no cameras in the courtroom, right? So I had this case that was based off of a shaky cell phone video where it was like two different groups of people, and like the whole, like in Chicago, in a high gang area, where they ended up that somebody shot and killed people right there. So it was on. The people had their phones, right? But like everything's moving like this. So there was this one image, right, where, and I watched it in like slow-mo, super slow, up and back, and it looked like they could have been a gun being passed. So I watched it over and over, and I realized it was the sun reflecting on her metal belt. And that was with the movement of the thing. So in closing, they didn't do it anywhere else, but in closing, they were pulling up the video, and they had, because anytime you put something in the record, it's got to be marked. So all the video was by milliseconds, so there's like 10, 12 digits per screen, wherever they click pause. So they put up that portion and said you could see the gun go watch it yourself. You can see it being transferred here. So I turned to like my co-counsel, and I think our assistant that we had there, like, we need to get those numbers down, but it was going to move too quick. So we both, my co-counsel and I, took a photo because we have our screens right in front of us, took a photo of the screen of evidence in our very case. So in federal court, almost all the time this happens to me in federal court. It's like, no, I guess multiple. It's not only federal courts. I take that back, and it didn't happen all the time. But oftentimes the prosecution has young lawyers that are sitting in the room, and then they will, like, multiple times in this trial, people said, "Oh, Allison was making noises. I saw her roll her eyes. She did this, she did that." So we go to a break, we come back, the judge says, "Somebody took a picture." Someone said someone took a picture. Who took the picture? And I was like, that was me. You know, my co-counsel says nothing. He just stood quiet. So she starts to yell at me. Right now, it's an empty courtroom. She's on the bench. So she says, "Delete it right now." So I delete it. Right. And then she says, "Now I want to see your phone." And I said,
Oh my God.
Are you seriously? Are you challenging my integrity?" And she said, "I want to see your phone." So I
Wow.
give her my phone. She starts flipping through, and I was like, "Do you want to see the pictures of my kids next?" So I got disciplined for that. And I told them I went all the way to hearing on it. I was like, "Well, like, when the judge is wrong, and she's got me over that, like, I can't say anything." And the way the system thinks of it is no. Like, I never get to tell her, "You can't talk to me like that in front of the jury," which I should very well be able to tell her that. It's not like I
Mm.
said it in a disrespectful way. I'm conveying information about what you are actually doing, but I'm still saying it, respectfully. When we were back on the side, when she called me behind and was looking at my phone, and I was like, "Do you want," that wasn't very respectful. "Do you want to see pictures of my kids now?" I was fucking irritated, but it's like, and I think I was asking people afterwards, I was like, "Well, it doesn't seem right that that's what you're saying, or lawyers can never tell a judge, we always have to be respectful no matter what they're doing."
Mm.
And there is a judicial oversight committee, and you can report them, but I venture to guess that they do not handle things like, "This judge does all her rulings against the defense and pro prosecution." It's got to be something more like, "She mistreats people, she yells at you," like, not her legal decisions on stuff. So
And
no, it's
isn't
like,
the judicial committee made up of other judges anyway? So
I
they
would assume
kind of
so.
got
And
a.
I've actually never reported a judge, no matter how bad they get. Um, But I would assume that they're made up of other judges or former judges, retired judges, one or the other.
And Ali, so I've heard whispers that when you were in the courtroom in Delphi, that you wanted to have a look at the evidence and maybe there was something there.
So Bob and I, when we got in town initially, we went to lunch with Lee and Andrea, and Andrea and I were talking, and she was saying how this whole policy, and she's like, "I'm just going to show up." She's like, "I'm just going to go. Let them tell me I can't. It's for the public as well." I was like, "Yeah, all right." I was like, "Bob, you should do that too." Right. Meanwhile, I'm not expecting to come back. So then I think she went, with no problem. So I was like, "All right, I'm gonna go too," like, and it was sort of like I walked out of the courtroom to talk to the last witness. It was Weber. No,
Oh,
no, not Weber. The
I was
other
going to say that would
wait.
be an interesting one to talk to. I would love to talk to Brad Weber myself, actually.
No, it was the other neighbor that lives above and back. I forget. Was Brad wait, is Brad Weber the one who found the girls, or that's the one? No, that's the van. So it's the one who found the girls. I forget his name.
Okay. Yeah.
So he couldn't hear what he said at the end, like a question. So I went out and asked him something. When I came back in, they were already all like standing there. So I was like, "Oh, I'll just," and most people were fine and nice. And then this one reporter was like, "Are you credentialed press?" I'm like, "No, I'm a member of the public." She said, "Well, there's been a change to the decorum order, and this is only for credentialed media." And I said, all right, well, I'll let the judge tell me that. So she kind of like took 2 steps back and she was like, well, that is what the judge, she said something so the judge could know to address me. And, so she says, ma'am, come here. Are you credentialed media? And I was like, no, Your Honor, I'm a member of the public. And I was like trying to make words. And then she said, well, ma'am, you're going to have to leave. And I said, okay, I will, Your Honor, but can you please tell me when is the, and she cut me off again, told me to leave. And then I tried one more time and I was trying to spit out like the statute and get enough words. But I think I said, when is the time for the public? Because under your statute, and then like before I could even, she said it a third time. So,
and then your frog
what
walked
she
out,
said
Ali.
was, you need to leave the well of the courtroom. She didn't kick me out of the, entire courtroom, courthouse, never come back kind of thing. She just said, you need to leave the well of the courtroom. So I did.
So basically you're just proving that you're a badass, Ali.
Yeah, I guess.
Bob's back. Thank you for returning, Bob. Oh, whoa. Whoa. Bob's not back. No, Adam might fix that for me.
What's up, y'all?
We were just talking about how Gull kicked me out of the well of the courtroom.
Yeah. It's classic Ali. And
I was telling the story about when the what's the judge's name on Vendetta? You remember? Or whatever. I was telling that story about when she took my cell phone and was looking through my pictures.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. No one else is going to know.
Trump was trying to nominate her to the Supreme Court. That judge.
I actually got a call. I don't know if it was for political stuff. It wasn't the judge, but from the Department of Justice or the Secret Service, or maybe it was the Secret Service, about the prosecutor that was on it, and asked me, you had it, because they do this like when they're vetting people. So they called me and they said, you had a case with this person. Would you find them trustworthy? Would you find them this? And I told them, I'm like, look, there was some stuff that I tried to talk to them, and I don't think that they were in the pursuit of truth and justice. And I definitely was trying to be even-handed, but definitely gave them some pause. I wasn't going to not say, because this video, the way they were misinterpreting it and putting on witnesses to say things that you could see. So they'd put witnesses on to say they saw something, right? And in the video, I was talking about that flashy video that was going all around. You could see that at the point in time when the bullet went off, this person was already running, but they're saying, like, they're calling them to have them testify. So I'm arguing beforehand, Your Honor, they cannot put these people on to say things where we're seeing they didn't see it, So the whole thing was like a sham in my eye. The whole thing was a sham. That's why I was so worked up about it. It was like, it's a sham, and you assholes all know it's a sham. Like, what you're doing is wrong and not right. Like, this is ridiculous, because they thought my client had passed off the gun to the shooter. That was what they were charging her with. So I was
that was the flash of her belt, but it actually was her belt, not the gun.
Right. And it didn't have to be at that moment, but that's what they said at closing, that it was there. But I forgot where I was going with it, but yeah, I forgot why I got all back into it. An Ali rant where she gets the point.
Yes. Tracy said, I love an Ali rant. So do I.
I saw that. That's
with regards to that, when you were trying to call Gull out on her bullshit about the evidence, accessibility for the public. Obviously, Andrea filed a legal something, a motion. No, something.
A writ.
Unfortunately, it's a writ of men. Yes, and it wasn't
the same thing. A motion, but because it's getting filed with the Supreme Court, that type of motion is called a writ.
So I think I heard. Obviously, it was denied by Judge Gull quite swiftly, actually. That writ. But in terms of and obviously it's a moot
there's
point
two
now.
Things. One was a motion in front of the judge that she filed, and that was denied. When that was denied, she filed a writ to the Supreme Court.
Okay.
And I don't know what happened with that.
So, well, obviously, it's a moot point with accessing the evidence in court, because the trial has now ended. But I think in terms of accessing the audio files, etc. It hopefully still is a thing.
Yeah, and I just think that those things should be, those are the kind of things that I would expect the judicial system to address quickly. Like, and I was kind of shocked, like in the like what's the guy's name with all the brothers that was just on trial for the shooting at the on the movie set, which
Baldwin.
Alec
Baldwin.
Baldwin.
Like that his lawyer, that the special prosecutor is still the special prosecutor when the judge had that many issues. I'm like, what's taking so long for somebody to take some action here? And it's like the Supreme Court saw what she was doing before. And then if they see this, you would think that that would trigger some sort of judicial inquiry as to why she's refusing to follow, standard operating procedure. But thanks, Jay.
Good to see you, Jay, by the way. Thank you for being here. Bob.
Yep.
We were talking before about, Ali and I were speaking about the verdict, and what was your response? What was your reaction, I guess, when you heard the verdict? Second part of the question: were you actually in court by that time? Because I know there was a little bit of a quickie going on there with Judge Gull to get it read before the announced time.
Yeah, so I'll take it from the backwards going forward. So yeah, I was there. I had walked with Kathy and Jan and the family in for the verdict. We were actually the last people in the courtroom. So when we got in there, yeah, the entire courtroom was already filled. So, and I was listening to you guys ahead of time. I mean, in terms of, could I see Gull giving a time frame, and doing it more quickly so as the crowd couldn't build outside? Yeah, I could see her doing that. But the reality is that it appeared that they were waiting for Kathy Allen to get in the courtroom before they did the verdict, because we were literally the last 9 people to walk in, so, and as soon as we sat down, she said, bring the jury in. So I don't know if it was just judicial economy, like she was just trying to get this thing, done, get that verdict read, or if she was cognizant of what was going on outside. Because by the time I got out, and I think I was the first person out after the verdict, and I'm I look at everybody just kind of standing there, staring at the courthouse. I'm like, and I didn't know if anybody had somehow the word had gotten out to people. And I kind of shouted out, I'm like, are you all waiting to hear what the verdict is? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, guilty on all counts. And then I just walked away.
Bob, that's heavy that you had to deliver that news to all those people.
Yeah, it was a weird moment. And I don't know that they all heard me, because 5 minutes later, somebody came out and they shouted it, and then the people that were happy about it cheered. In terms of my feeling in the courtroom, and it probably is different. I would have had a different feeling than if I was sitting at home like Ali was, just kind of getting it second, third hand. She was on a live stream with Melanie Little. They were waiting for the verdict. She was waiting for text from me. And then, I send the text to Ali, or she saw my tweet. And, and just kind of watching their reaction to it was different. When you're sitting in the courtroom, and I was trying to explain to people that I actually had the feeling that I get when I'm awaiting a verdict on our own case, which, something that Ali and I have tried, which was super weird to me. I got that same kind of nauseous, twisting in your stomach feeling, and you're like, oh my God, you just keep saying, oh my God, to yourself, and it's there's that walk into the courthouse, and the closer it gets, the more anxious you start feeling. And then you get in there, and if your client's in custody, they'll bring them out, and then they're standing next to you, and I'll typically put my arm around their shoulder and be like, you ready for this? And, and it's that moment in time when you're kind of sitting there waiting. And the way I kind of described it is, as defense attorneys in this country, you're used to getting guilty verdicts. Like that's the norm. It's not the norm to get acquittals. It's rare, especially in a murder case, especially where there's a child that's been killed. Like they want somebody to pay typically.
Mm.
So like I sat there not knowing how I was going to feel when they read the verdict. And like when they read it, like I had this, like I didn't feel surprised. I wasn't like, oh my God, which was so weird for me. And I didn't know, like going into it, how I was going to feel until that exact moment in time, to what my actual feelings were. And then I realized that I would have been shocked, and it had nothing to do with the facts or the evidence. It was based on my muscle memory, or like the Pavlov's dog thing of just kind of being used to. And Ali and I won plenty of trials, but it's still, even when Ali were like we'd be waiting for a verdict and we'd go do our typical thing as we'd hit a restaurant up. Each of us would get a drink after a hard fought trial. We'd order a little food. We knew that there would be hours, so we're not sitting there getting hammered, but you want to wind down. It's a stressful thing to do a trial. So, and we'd be talking about it. We'd be like, man, we put on a really good case, and we'd try to figure out what the jury was going to do. And we'd be like, yeah, that one jury seemed to like you. And like, I saw this juror look at you when they left the courtroom. And, I saw so all those kind of things you're trying to work out, but every time we'd get a not guilty, we'd have this like, oh my God, you feel that like that relief and a little bit of surprise. And I realized at that point in time that I would have been surprised at that moment if we would have gotten an acquittal, just based on my experiences of doing this for 20 years and how it typically goes and how I always feel like when we get an acquittal, even though we felt like we should get an acquittal, based on the evidence and based on the case. So from that sense, I was not shocked, based on the evidence that was presented at trial, especially the verdicts, or I'm sorry, the confessions. Like, it's really, really hard to convince 12 people to ignore that volume of confessions. And I thought that Rosie did a bang up job. Like, he did an amazing job getting as much evidence as he could to show the conditions of Rick's confinement that were completely inhumane. Like, we cannot allow for that to happen in this country. That cannot be the norm. That cannot be the way that they extract confessions out of people, whether they're like, it just like, we have to take a stand as citizens in this country that we're not going to allow for that to happen. Because when those videos of the incel, and it's incel, not the word incel. But when Rick Allen's in his cell, when they make it out to the public, and they will, because it's, as far as I know, they have not been sealed, and they were put into evidence. When the world sees that, it's going to change everybody's mind on all these people that are like, oh, can you have a tablet? And, I'm like, this dude was treated like a literally like an animal, and not like at a zoo. Like, he was treated like a caged animal that the keeper doesn't give a shit about. That's how it was unbelievable. And when those make it out to the world at large, it's going to be a wake up call, because what went on here is that I just, because of the process that led up to trial, in terms of the decisions that Judge Gull made and what her motivation, I heard Ali trying to like get into Gull's brain about like why she made decisions that she did and the things that she did during the course of this thing. And Ali and I know, she's got colleagues, she's got other people that wear that robe in her county that had to have been saying to her, like, yo, like, you're a little bit off the rails with some of this stuff, aren't you? Like, are you worried about getting overturned maybe on some of this stuff? She's like, and I think that as much as you hope that judges who are not the trier of fact in a case where it's gone to a jury, they are the keepers of the evidence. They are the gatekeepers of what comes in and what stays out. You know, they make rulings during the course of the trial, but if it's not a bench trial, they're not the trier of fact. And I just happen to be of the opinion that Gull had made a decision a long time ago that Rick Allen was guilty, like in her mind. And all of her rulings were indicative of that. And I don't, you know, I would never be able to prove it. It's not based on anything other than the way that she ruled on everything that was in front of her for the course of 2 years, you know? So it's like that's just how I feel about it, you know? And I feel that, like, ultimately at the end of the day, I wish for the girls, for Abby and Libby, I wish that I could sit here today and feel confident that they got the right person. And I just don't. I can't, because of the process. I can't feel that it was a just and correct verdict, primarily because of the way that she handled the all of the pretrial motion phase, and also, most importantly, how they treated Richard Allen. I think was an absolute planned out thing, wherein they knew after they took 2 hard runs at him, which we got to see those
That they
entire
needed to break him down.
they knew they had to break him. When Holman could not break him down, and then after Holman couldn't do it, they then send Kathy in. And they had made their run at Kathy before she walked into that room. Kathy was told, "We've got your husband dead to rights. We have the bullet, and that was found 6 inches from Abby's foot, and it matches your husband's gun. I don't know how to tell you this, but your husband did this." So that's how so you can imagine being married to somebody for 35 years and being told that in that moment in time, and just try to put yourself in her shoes. Where do you think her brain was at? She must have been going back through the last 5 years, been like trying to think of like every possible thing. Like, what did I miss this somehow? Like, what did I miss? Were there signs? Should I have known? Like all the things going through her mind when she goes and sits down next to Rick and she's a puddle. You know, she could barely, you could barely even hear a word she was saying. You know, she was like, because Kathy's not necessarily a super soft spoken person, you know, but in that interview, she's like, you know, the pitch of her voice is way higher than normal. She's sitting next to her husband. Her husband's trying to explain to her. It's like, you know, she's like, and she starts asking about the bullet. She's like, how? Like, how are they saying that the bullet? He's like, I don't know, babe. He's like, I can't explain what's impossible. I don't like, how am I supposed to explain it? Like, I'm just telling you. He's like, you know, I'm not capable of doing this. You've been with me for 35 years. You know, we've been together since we were 19. You know, this isn't something that I'm capable of doing. And she's like, I know, but like, how do you explain the bullet? You know? And he's like, he's like, what do you like? And how do you argue a negative? Like, how do you fight that? If he didn't do it and it's not his bullet, how do you expect him to explain how it's there, or how they're saying it's a match? Like there is no explanation for it, right? It's like, so
Right.
the point being that they sent her in, she was the last ditch effort. They're like, what, you know, we're going to tell his wife that he did this, that we got him dead to rights. We're going to send her in that room. And right before that, that's where you have Holman saying, he's like, are you too big of a coward? You're going to do this to your wife and your daughter. You're going to have them live this nightmare of this bullshit because you're too big of a coward to admit that you did it. And so, like, that's what prefaced that. Her walking into the room 2 minutes later, sitting next to him. And they just thought for certain that was going to get him to cave on it. And he's going to say, babe, I don't, you know what I mean? Like that. So when that didn't happen, like, there had to have collectively been this thought process that, like, look, because they couldn't have been feeling great about mere presence at the bridge and that bullshit unspent casing. Like, when that turns out to be your case, and at that point they had searched the vehicle, they didn't find anything in it. They had probably gone through the devices. They didn't find shit on those by the 26th. So they knew that there was a good chance that was going to be it. So like they had to know, like, it's the answer for why he ends up in Westville, and that they cut him off from seeing the only person that really mattered to him in the whole world in that moment of time. you know, more than his daughter, and he loves Brittany, but he need like Kathy is his backbone. Like he's got this dependent, like aside from the major depressive disorder and the anxiety, he's got this, you know, that dependent disorder that he needs to constantly be told that he's loved and that he's good enough, because he has this, you know, self-worth issues, and he's a very passive person and all this other stuff. And it was like, they knew they had to break him. So what they did is they put him in there and they shut him off from any contact from Kathy, other than like weeks would go by, and then he'd be able to get a tablet call out. Like people are like, oh, there were 700 hours. A bulk of that was all after the confessions happened. They shut him off. He did not have physical contact. He did not lay eyes on his wife from the last time that he saw her, which was when he hugged and kissed her in that interrogation on the 26th of October.
Mm-hmm.
And then they took away his only support, his biggest support system. And when you are thrust into a situation like that, where you are thrown into a prison cell with nothing, with just completely deprived of any kind of sensory, like anything, like no window, no nothing, just concrete walls, a steel shitter, a mattress on a floor, and nothing. Like they broke him. It's that simple. So like I can't trust it. I cannot trust, because of the process that they took. If they would have stuck him in Cass County Jail, even if he's in a single person cell, like, but he's able to like talk to the other guys that are like in the cells, the holding cells next to him. If they let Kathy come in, you know, once a week to see him, and then he starts confessing, I'm far more inclined to believe those confessions than this shit. You know, I mean,
so Bob, it's interesting then how, because I mean, the jury, by all accounts, the jury was viscerally affected by those incel videos and the camera, the video camera footage as well. It was patently clear, and I mean, did was the timeline of the dates where those things happened and where Kathy wasn't allowed to see him, was that not perhaps made clear enough by the defense to the jury?
It was not.
So that's a drop ball there, perhaps, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Unfortunately.
it should have been absolutely stated that the first time that Kathy sees him physically is, I think, like probably like a week to 14 days after the confessions end. So like she like, you know, and because like my thing is that this doesn't have to be a situation where they're threatening his family, which, based on what Kathy's told me, that there were so many phone calls where he's like, are you okay? Are you guys safe? Are you okay? Are you guys safe? Like always asking her that. We didn't get to hear any of that. We didn't get to hear any exculpatory calls because they didn't put Rick on the stand. In order to get those in, they would have had to put Rick on the stand. So
no, they wouldn't get those in if they put Rick on the stand. How are those admissible? They're self-serving hearsay.
Well,
you only get in the stuff that's incriminating.
There had to have been a way to get it in.
Not under the law, not one that required him to get on the stand. If they could have gotten it in, they could have called the father or whoever was on the other line of the call to authenticate it.
That is not like, so McClellan made the argument when they were trying to get the three, like when Rosie made it to get the preceding phone call on the day that there were three.
I remember.
Calls,
I remember you said that.
Yeah, and it's like there has to be a way to get it in.
No, not one that requires him to literally be on the stand as opposed to the other party to the phone call.
Well, maybe not the self-serving ones, but the ones that they're treating me like I'm in Guantanamo Bay, and the ones that like I mean, if you're trying to show that there was something going on in that prison, like I don't see how those are self-serving.
Because he can say it. If he's on the stand, he can just say it. They treated me like this. They did this. They did. What the hell do you need the audio for? If there's a reason to get the audio in, there's not any reason why a legal way to get it on. And I think there was, for sure. I think that was the number one wrong call legally. But you don't need him on the stand to do it. It could be the other party to that you didn't need him on the stand for them to put in the other one because they had a way to get around hearsay and someone else to authenticate it. So it would be the same exact thing.
Yeah, but how are you making that argument? What's your argument there? Because I mean, Brad made a
one
pretty
that
good
they
argument.
made was the one that's the best one, is that it was a complete
Context.
record. Right.
Yeah.
He had to give context. And then I don't know, there was a couple others. I'd thought of a bunch of things. I was I looked at some research, and it was like, oh no, maybe that wasn't on that. Maybe that was on the van stuff. But I think that I had come up. Oh, the other was for the Guantanamo Bay. It was a mental impression. Somebody discussing how they feel. That's a hearsay exception. I don't know why that one wouldn't work.
Yeah. All right,
Mental or
baby, you gotta
physical.
go get Scout.
Oh, all right. Bye,
Sorry.
guys.
Sorry. I texted
Bye.
you the
Thank you,
address.
Ali.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Ali. It was amazing. Thank you. Chat, say
So-
thank you to Ali. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So,
So yeah, it was like, like that. The whole thing was just, to me, like I just walked out of that courtroom just like heartbroken for Kathy. I mean, that was like kind of where my head was at, and like because it was like with Kathy, like in the courtroom, she's crying, but by the time she walks out, and then she went in with, because we all walked out, they let us walk out first. They let Kathy Allen walk out of the courtroom first. Brad and Andy and Jennifer like took both Jan and Kathy into a room. They talked to her for a couple minutes. They sent us down, so I was the first one out. And then like I went over to the side of the courthouse where they knew they were going to come out. And that's when Kathy's like adamant, like Kathy had switched in that short of a period of time from like sad to angry. Like we're like, this isn't over. Like we're putting up the fight. Like and Rick needs Kathy to be there. Like she's an absolutely critical like a ingredient in that whole thing, because without Kathy in there basically saying to Rick, we're fighting, this is what's going on, like keeping his spirits up, I don't know that he'll make it on his own, like himself. You have two things that you worry about now with Rick staying alive, and it's obviously other inmates, and then Rick by his own hand. I mean, Rick just suffers from what he suffers from, which is, I mean, he's got stuff going on. So, I mean, keeping him alive is critical, obviously. So, he needs her. He needs her to be spearheading the fight when it's going to be starting, and just keeping his hopes up and keeping him, apprised of what's going on the appellate level, and just knowing that he's got support out here. Cause it's like, when you look at cases recently, I mean, and I know you're knee deep into Reed, and I covered that very heavily on my channel as well. Like, you haven't seen two cases. Like, typically, you watch a trial, you'll have some people that might be like, oh, he might be innocent, but you haven't seen like splits like this, like you have with Reed and with Richard Allen's cases. Like, you just don't see them, which should be an indicator to people that there's issues here. Like that these were not clear cut circumstantial cases. And, this is going to be a fight, and it's going to be a really interesting legal fight, depending on, which lawyers you're talking to. And I had Carol Winnicke and Michael Osbrook over on my channel a couple nights ago, and they have, they have different concepts of how they should attack this from the get. Michael's of the mindset that you go post-conviction stuff first, which is where you're trying to bring in newly discovered evidence. You know what I'm saying? Which is a different thing than, because when you're talking about your direct appeal, which is what you typically see, that's the typical process. You're not talking about newly discovered evidence. You're making arguments about things that you think were errors during the actual trial and during the pretrial phase, and you're limited to that. Like, your post-conviction stuff is where you're trying to go out there, investigate, and dig up new newly discovered evidence that was not available at the time of trial in order to try to get him a new trial. So it's a very different thing. It's investigative heavy as opposed to record heavy, where you're making those arguments and trying to identify issues in the trial. So they're two very different things. So, we'll see how it plays out.
So, Bob, I heard you mentioned on the lawyer, Peter Tragos, the fact that no discussion whatsoever about the stomach contents of the girls in the trial. Do you think that could be something that might be part of that direct appeal?
Yeah, I mean, it could be, and the other thing is that like it gets tricky. It gets really tricky with appeals, and then as opposed to post-conviction stuff, because that issue, like the defense obviously had the opportunity to bring it up as well. So
Yes.
I don't know what that says about the stomach contents. I mean, we know from Derek German's testimony that he made the girls banana pancakes. So we know, and bananas are a pretty hardy food, like that is not going to digest very quickly. They'll hang in there for a while, because my thing in this trial was, once she shut down the third party culprit stuff, I'm like, attack the timeline. You have to attack the timeline, because they don't have any way of showing when the girl's time of death was. We know it from, they didn't take a core body temperature when they found the girls, and where you can kind of work your way back. I think it's like a 1.5 degrees per hour or something, so you get an idea, you at least get a time frame of when you believe the girls perished. And like, you didn't see that here, and you didn't hear about the stomach content. So what I was kind of saying that you have to worry about is, like, are they going to go ineffective assistance of counsel on direct appeal, which typically is not a winning appeal. Like, if you're going, because it's like, they'll say it was strategic, like typically they'll say, well, that was a strategy issue. That wasn't something that, that they should have done. We don't know how much of a difference it would have made had they brought it in, So, I mean, obviously I'm assuming that the appellate court will have they'll have that in evidence, because they put the autopsy report in. So they'll see it, and that's where it will contain what the stomach contents are. But because they were never raised, like, I think the issue is going to be waived, so it would have to come in under an argument that it was ineffective, that they didn't bring it up. So it's like, you're basically having to attack the trial lawyers, and how does that affect them wanting to try the case again? If because trial lawyers don't take it personally. I mean, if you get a client that's convicted, you're willing to lay on the sword, and they're going to come after you in terms of the appellate level, in terms of ineffective assistance of counsel. Like, I mean, they came after Allison and I like banshees in Garcia, and I felt very confident. I put on a hell of a defense in that case. It's like, and they almost exclude, like, to the exclusion of everything else. They came after Allison and I, like, basically, probably the main thing is that Ali got booted from that statement she made outside of court about, that she felt that our experts' DNA evaluation exonerated Garcia. So she made that, like, right, that statement right before trial. I'll never forget that day. It was like she was doing a Skype with some news station. I'm like, don't do this. I'm like, don't do it. I'm like, they want to get rid of you. They want you off this case so bad, and you're going to give them the opportunity to go at it. And they did. So, and they were just, and it was easy there. It wasn't, we were in on what they call a pro hoc vice license, which is a temporary license to practice in a state that you are not licensed in. So it's real easy to just pull that card, say, see ya, we're done with you. We've terminated your temporary license to practice here. It's different, like for Baldwin and Rosie, like they're licensed Indiana attorneys. And at that point they were Rick's counsel of choice. So, like, I knew that they were going to get there, like, in the way that she went about doing that, removing them was such like an ambush. It was insane. I just think it's going to be a thing where, it's ultimately going to boil down to, do the appellate courts feel that the the manifest weight of those confessions outweighs any of the other errors that were made by Judge Gull, and that they're going to say that those other things, yes, they were errors, but they're harmless errors because nothing is going to outweigh those confessions. So like, that's really where the, you know, the battle is. And like Osbrook's not as, you know, he's not as optimistic about having success with that. But like I thought Kara's point was well taken, that look, these judges are human beings and they're Americans, and they can't be okay with what they did to Rick in that prison. You know, it's like, that cannot become the norm. We will be living in a very different country if it turns into a thing where we're allowed to just throw pretrial detainees into prison, say that they're safekeeping, and then just cut them off from the world until they lose their shit. And, you know, because it's like, my whole concept is like, again, it wasn't a threat thing. It was like, dude, you can end all this. You can end this. You want to see your wife, that thing. Like, and he says, yeah, you know, I did it. And it's, he had no affect when you're listening to it. It's like you're listening to it, you're just robotic, you know? And it's like, I caught this thing at the end of the last one that they played, the first time they played it, where he says, okay, like after Jan had hung up. And that's the one I thought that was probably the most damaging of the spoken, because that's where she's like, why are you saying this, Rick? She's like, you didn't do it. He's like, well, it's like, I wouldn't say I did it if I didn't, you know. He's like, well, like, you know what I mean? So he gave some pushback to his mother. And then at the end, after Jan hangs up, you can hear Rick Allen say, okay.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah. And so like,
that's concerning, right?
What happened? I'm like looking at everybody and I'm like, did you hear that? They're like, what? I'm like, where he said, okay, like right after the call disconnected from Jan, like it was just like he was talking to somebody in the room. Like, was that sufficient? Like, you know, that's how I read it. You know, like, was that good enough? Was that a convincing, you know, cause like I did it ain't shit, you know, like, but when he starts getting into that, and, you know, and as far as Walla, don't even get me started.
Well, I put up a comment before, and I feel like you'd like to address this because I've heard you state on many live streams for years, actually, your own mostly, but on other channels. You want to answer this? Why didn't you represent him? I can't believe you think he's innocent. Bob, your thoughts?
Well, the first answer is I'm not licensed in Indiana. And there's like, after doing the Garcia thing, there is no way that I would have ever gone in pro hoc vici there. They just, when you're out of state lawyers,
they ripped you to shreds.
Yeah, they just tortured
they hated you, didn't they? They hated you.
They hated us.
Can I just say quietly on that, if you haven't listened to Bob's Defense Diaries podcast, which came before the YouTube channel, you have to. Bob, your voice, your storytelling abilities, that's my top one or two true crime podcasts in general of all time. Bravo, sir.
Thank you, Lisa.
And you're telling your own stories. But yes, and then the second point there.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is like, I can't believe you think he's guilty. You know, like this. So, like, if you strip away, and I have no idea if he did or he didn't. Now, I have my own impressions, and I think that I have a pretty good like source of information in terms of the person that knows him best, and that being Kathy, and Kathy is adamant that like there's no part of her that thinks that her husband did this, you know. But like, the fact of the matter is none of us were there. So I can't say with any kind of certainty, did he do it or didn't he do it? But what I can say is that I don't trust this verdict, and that I'm extremely concerned that like Michael Osbrook was like telling me he's worried that if the jurors start coming out and talking about, yeah, the confessions are what did it for me, that might hurt his appellate chances. And that might be true. You know, and it's like that if you strip away those confessions, which you can't in reality, but just as an exercise, strip away those confessions, and then it's left to what was in that probable cause affidavit, which from the very beginning, I said leans innocent. Like that was not enough to convict somebody of a double homicide of two beautiful little girls. It's just not. It can't, like, it did not convince me. That was not enough evidence. You have eyewitnesses that are all describing somebody that looks completely different than Rick Allen, and they're all different from one another. Like they're all describing different people, which I'm not sweating the eyewitnesses. Like if you don't know in that moment of time, I say this all the time, if you don't understand, you know, in that second that you see something that you need to commit it to memory, your memory is going to be as good as it's going to allow it to be, which is not going to be good. It's one thing if you're like seeing the commission of a crime and you're like, oh my God. And you're like, you see a getaway car and you're trying to, like, you know that you have to commit it to memory. You're trying to read the plate. You're like, oh my God, I have to get the make and the model and the color of that car. What was that dude wearing? I need to commit it. In this situation, you just have people that saw a dude walking through the trail system. They don't know at that time that two girls are going to end up being murdered. Right. So like they don't know that they need to memorize everything that they saw about this person. So your memory is going to be murky at best, which pans itself out, you know, but to not have anybody ID him in court. And I heard you asking that question, Lisa, and it is like they deposed all these witnesses, you know, but they didn't have Rick Allen sitting next to him in the deposition to where they were able to ask, is this the dude? Is this the guy? Is Rick Allen the guy? You've seen a picture of him, or, you know, I don't know if when they deposed him, they held up a picture of Rick Allen. Is this the guy that you saw in court or on the trails that day? You know, like, I don't know if those were asked during the depths. I would like, and maybe they were afraid to ask him during the depths because you get them, but you know, the state asked, like the state definitely asked, like if they could have gotten an in-court ID from him, they would have been like, yes, that is the guy that I saw out on the trails. But like nobody was able to, like, were willing to say that, yes, that's definitively who I saw. We had the same thing in Garcia. All the eyewitnesses that saw Anthony Garcia walking, or that person walking around that neighborhood, not one of them testified in open court that, yep, that's the dude I saw. You know, so you don't have the in-court identification. And it's just like, if like, look, I get why people are feeling relief for those that want justice for Abby and Libby. And I'm just going to suggest to you that you can't allow your desire for justice for the girls to cloud the reality of the situation. And that is that we had a case with very little circumstantial evidence, and a case with what I feel were most likely extracted confessions that were essentially extracted by way of saying, hey man, we're going to end this thing. Like, we're going to get you out of here, but you just have to tell us you did it, you know? And like that, I think that that's probably the way it would have played down, you know? And the opposite argument is, which is hard to argue, you know, like, is it possible that he's telling the truth? I mean, I guess, you know, but it's like, you kind of look at it.
Feel like it, though. It doesn't feel like it, Bob. It you know, the guilty verdicts of the trials. Like, I'm an avid trial watcher and love all things to do with the law. And I can't think of any other guilty verdict with circumstance. Mostly all murder trials are circumstantial. There's very little direct evidence in these trials.
Rarely. It's very, very rare to get direct evidence. Like,
so if you know, humans, you know, gut instinct and the feel of things has kept humans alive for hundreds of thousands of years, millions, well, hundreds of, a long time. Yeah, we've been around for a while. So I don't know numbers, Bob. I'm not science. I'm not science. But for me, this verdict just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like it's the right one, and I trust my gut instinct. So,
you know, and it's like, I just like the process. And it's more than anything, I just can't trust the process that was applied here in this case. To trust it, it feels like it was forced. It feels like a railroad job to me. I can't put it any other way. Like, typically, like you said, I don't feel this way for a vast majority of guilty verdicts that come down.
No.
Like, I just don't. Like, you know, it's like you got the Karen Reed thing, which, you know, obviously is a very different set of circumstances. You don't have two little girls that lost their lives, you know, but I mean, you have two passionate sides on that are just,
and she's I think also, sorry to interrupt, Bob, but for me, one of the big things, and Adam put a comment up in chat a while ago, or maybe anyway, Karen Reid is a beautiful woman with money. Richard Allen is a middle-aged man who's not beautiful. Who, that can also play into it. He's not, that white woman syndrome, which is usually attached to missing women who get more media coverage. But it's the same kind of thing, right?
That's a real thing. That's an absolute real thing. I mean, it's like, and it's just not like a defendant, like an attractive defendant. It's, it's like an attractive victim, like female victim, like blonde victim. They just that's who the press decides to gravitate towards in terms of coverage. I mean, we've got so many people of color, so many indigenous that are just like get zero coverage from the media in this country that it's insane, So yeah. And kind of one other point that I wanted to bring up is that, that I talked about on my live some, but the show of force in that courtroom, in terms of having like two like suited up feds or whatever the hell they were sitting right behind Allen the entire trial. They I mean, and you have I had never seen that many cops in a courtroom. I mean, what as a juror are you going to think other than like, oh my God, like they have to have like 10 cops in here in order to control this monster sitting there? I mean, like what impression do you think that that's going to give a jury? Like, I hope they make that argument on appeal because it's valid. Like typically in any trial, they have like one or two bailiffs in there. Like, it doesn't matter what the person did. It's like I don't know what the show of force was in like Murdoch. I don't know what it's going to be in like Koberger, but I'll be shocked if they have like armed like officers all over the place. I don't give a shit that they're wearing suits. Nobody thought that those two guys that were sitting behind Rick Allen and stood every time he stood and got in front of him, like every time that he stood up. It's like no one thought that those guys were lawyers. I don't give like
he's such a meek, unassuming, seeming fellow. Murderer or not, I personally feel in my heart that Rick Allen is factually innocent, but I understand that we weren't there. We don't know for sure.
Right, you can't know, but like you're allowed to your gut, you're allowed common sense, you're allowed to like look at all the things that are kind of missing, and for those people who are like, yeah, he fits my profile. I'm like, what is that? Like they found nothing of like any kind of deviant shit on any of his devices. Like you don't go from zero to murdering two young girls on a crime of opportunity like overnight. It just doesn't have, there's a build up to it. Like you build up. It's like you've got these dark fantasies, which nowadays you're able to kind of like keep yourself at bay by going on the internet and looking up all the twisted shit that's going on in your mind, going in the shower and jerking off, whatever the fuck you're doing to like keep your shit at bay. You just don't have that here. You have a guy with no criminal background, no kind of indication of violence at all at any point in his life. And it's different. It's like, I was on Sleuth Intuition, who is very much, Richard Allen's the guy, they got the right guy, and like, I'll talk to anybody on this case. Like, I don't have shit. Like I'll say what my position is. People are allowed to disagree with me. That's what makes it great to be a human being, is to have, civil discourse. Without that, like we've got nothing. Otherwise, we might as well just be animals. That's the difference between animals and human beings. We have opposable thumbs and the ability to be able to communicate. And, this is just a case where no one's going to change my mind on it. Short of Rick Allen coming out and saying, I don't want to appeal it. I did it. Like they got the right guy. If that happens, then I'll be like, all right, well, Rick has just said, and like he's not in psychosis now. You know what I mean? But it's exactly. You have all these confessions taking place in a 3-month period when he's psychotic, and you've got that evidence, and you've got Gull shutting them down from putting any kind of defense on other than reasonable doubt. I don't trust it. It's that simple.
Agreed. Bob, I know you've got to fly soon, but I just wanted to ask you one or maybe two more things.
Sure.
I've heard, and it might have even been on your live with Cara and Michael, but is there talk about doing some deep diving into when the white van was in social? I guess actually it's a two-part question, same question, because it brings Monica Walla in as well. So in terms of his direct appeal, his post-conviction stuff, trying to nail down when that stuff started being spoken about in chat rooms and blogs, lol, and social media stuff, all the groups, and also the correlation between Walla's interest in all of those things before she was assigned to being his treating physician.
Yeah, I mean, look, like that was something that like as soon, because like Baldwin called it like during his openings. He said, "Look, I want you to pay very close attention to the state's case, because in the middle of the trial, they're going to have to change their theory of the case." And it's exactly what they did. It's like and it was really towards the end of it, when they called Brad Weber to the stand, everybody in that courtroom was shocked. They're like, "Oh my God, they're putting Brad Weber on." Like there was the only time where I heard people kind of break character and like mumble and like, "Oh, where are you?" There was like a buzz in the courtroom when they called him, because it was shocking. And I think it took the defense, like they were shocked as well, because they had this statement from Weber wherein he had said he didn't go home that day right after work, that he had been out fixing his ATMs. He said that to Pohl, like one of the feds, and then whatever that cop's name was from Hammond, who was with him at the door. So, we came to find out that obviously they had subpoenaed Pohl to get him in there in order to get that report in, because when Baldwin tried to impeach him on it, like Gull shut it down. Like that was one of those impeachment things that was insane, like that she didn't allow him to do that. And so they're like, all right, well, we got to get him in. He had some kind of medical condition. So that's when they filed the motion saying, hey, we want him to appear via Zoom because he can't fly, and then Gull like said no. Like, and he was an important witness because like that puts his credibility in doubt. Like it makes the whole thing that there wasn't even a van there to see. Like it takes away the whole problem of you trying to explain away this concept that he saw a van. Because like, and I put Sleuthy on it like that morning. I'm like, yo, I need you to dig. Like I need you to find find out how many places that van was brought up, prior to Walla like taking on Rick as a patient. And then Sleuthy does what she does, and started digging. She like first thing she sends me is like Walla was a part of 9 Facebook groups. Like ours, she became a part of ours like the day of the safekeeping hearing.
That's wild, Bob. That's so blatant.
So crazy. So and she was in a ton of them. She was in Gray Hughes, she was in Sleuth Intuition, she was in the Murder Sheet, and how deep all of those people, because like my coverage on this case didn't start until there was the arrest. All of those folks were all trying to solve this case from behind their computer screens for 5 years. So, like the concept of a van was brought up all the time. So, I mean, whether or not and that's the thing about Walla, like, how can you trust her when she's doing that? Like she should have recused herself, but she couldn't allow herself to do it. It was too fascinating for her. Like she couldn't have asked for a more amazing experience for her to have firsthand knowledge about the case that she's been digging into for 5 years. You know what I'm saying? It's like she just, like anybody who thinks that's ethical for a psychologist to do that is just not being intellectually honest. It's like it's the worst thing that I've ever heard. I mean, she should be like they should pull her ticket. Like she shouldn't be doing that anymore. So, yeah. I mean, but I think that like being able to show that Weber was not a credible witness by putting on that he had a conflicting statement, shortly after the time that the girls went missing was powerful evidence that was never heard, because trying to impeach him and them just kind of saying it is a whole different thing than basically, getting him to say, well, yeah, I said it, but, like whatever. So it was, you know, those are just like the things that kind of like where you get stuck in the minutia, you know, where really the argument should have been more geared towards
Timeline.
you can't trust a damn word she said and attack
Mm.
the timeline. Like
Mm.
you know, I couldn't have said it any more than I did. You know, it's like when you're shut down on the third party shit, it's like you have to attack the timeline. I attack the timeline all the time. If they can't prove
Yes.
the time of death, then like how can you say when they died? Like and how do you know it was when Rick Allen was there? I don't give a shit when he was there from like 12 or 3. I'm saying they didn't die at either any time during that time period. So what now? You know, and they had ways
Mm.
to do it. And you know, I mean, you obviously have the phone, you know, with the port, and it's like I wish that they would have had somebody test it to see if there was water. The dirt thing's bullshit. Like, how is dirt working its way out of the port? Like while the phone's just sitting there like that, you know, so like the only thing that could feasibly be an explanation would be the water. So then, you know, it's under the shoe, which is under Abby, who's not, you know, so if she's still wet, like the shoe is blocking the phone from getting the water damage from the clothes, you know, like is it a situation where, you know, the phone freezes up at 5, like when it drops under 32 degrees is like could that cause it to happen? Like I like you know, it's like it would have been nice to have an answer for that, to have a response to Cecil's Google. You know,
Yes.
his 15-minute break Google where he comes up with that shit. So, you know, it's a frustrating case in a lot of different ways.
It really is. So we've been posting rickallenjustice.com in the chat, and I've got it there on the bottom of the screen also. So for chat, anybody who, and I'm sure I feel like all of you would like to stay appraised of what's happening with Rick in his post-conviction appellate process, etc. Bob, you got anything to say about that?
Sorry, ask it again because I was reading this.
Just the Rick Allen Justice, the Rick Allen Justice page. That's going to be a I have you put your email in, input your email, and then any new calls to action or just updates on what's happening will be sent via email, right?
Yeah, everything that's going to start happening in terms of what we're going to figure out. I mean, they're trying to get an appellate team put together. You know, there's a lot of moving parts with that in terms of, you know, trying to get the record prepared is a very expensive endeavor, you know, and it's like that. So, you know, it may make sense to have Gull appoint 2 Allen County appellate defenders initially just to get the record prepared for the appellate court and then have private counsel come in. But yeah, all the updates, like, you know, for those that are up for the fight, you know, we'll keep everybody updated with what's going on with that as it continues. And it's a timely process. Just understand that, like, this isn't like, you know, you're not going to get any kind of like anything that you want to hear in the next 6 months. You know, it'll probably take 6 to 8 months, if not longer, to get the first briefs filed. And that'll be when, you know, but like anything moving towards it, you know, if there's going to be a GoFundMe or something like that, but it's tough. Like you can't, we've got to figure out how you can raise funds using crowdsourcing. You know, I know that there's some out there because the crowdsourcing with the money for the experts was very clunky. You know, it was like, you know, like, it's just like, it's one of those things, but, it, you know, we just need people to kind of keep the faith. You know, like at some point I'll be having like the lawyers on my show when they have the gag off. I'm hoping then that I can convince Kathy to come on. I think people need to hear from her.
Yes.
I think that will be powerful for them to hear her voice. And I think that will be a very, very powerful call to action from Kathy if I can talk her into it. But you know, like I said, it's important that she's upset, that she's pissed now, because like when you're upset,
Yes.
that's when you want to fight back. So
Well, Bob, if you could pass on from all of us here at Shorty, all the Shorties, that Kathy, we're sending our love to her, our support, and anything that we can do for Kathy via the Rick Allen Justice page or to support you, Bob, just let me know, let us know, because it's only just beginning, really. This fight. It's unfortunately, but we will do whatever we need to do.
Yep, 100%. And I appreciate you always, Lisa. I think you're great. I think your channel's great. I think your message is great. I love your passion. You're you're fighting the good fight out here, and it's not easy. We get a lot of resistance from people that just I kind of call them the torch and pitchfork crew. But I mean, to me, due process and the Constitution are king. And like in this country, we can't allow for it to be shuttered for any defendant. And it's a thing that we have to rely on, because without it, we've got nothing as a country. So there you go.
Thank you for everything you've done, Bob, too. It's been keeping us informed along the way, with your outrage, your reading of motions. It's been a delight to be a part of your channel. So yes, thank you so much.
Right.
Thank Ali for us too. I really appreciate. I know she's busy with, as always, with her what I would call my peasant work shit. But I don't think Ali considers her work to be peasant work shit. That's just me being a traffic controller on my feet all day. But
that's
yes.
important work, though. Saving lives, pushing 10, baby.
I say what I say is I'm changing lives, saving lives, and making people smile in high vis normally. So
that's so true. Pushing 10 is very critical. Keeps us traveling. You know what I mean? Without you guys, it'd be pretty tough to travel.
Absolutely.
So,
all right. Well, thank you so much, Bob. I'll let you go, and I will just go through a couple of super chats and stuff like that. Oh, Romy wanted to say, she sent a super chat earlier when you were taking Scout to softball, that yours was the first YouTube channel that she started subscribing and watching, and thank you for everything. So
thank you, Romy. You're so sweet. We appreciate you. We appreciate all of you that hang out with us. We feel like we built a great community over there. So, which we obviously consider you very much a part of, Lisa. So, and you're building your own wonderful community of Shorties over here. So keep putting in the work, and if you build it, they will come. So,
yes.
all right,
and obviously, if you're not already, and I can't imagine you're not, but if you're not already, please go and subscribe to Defense Diaries. Adam and the mods have been dropping that link in the chat. Let's get you to 100,000 by Christmas, Bob.
Let's try. That'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. All right, you guys rock. Have a great weekend. Love y'all.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Bob. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh, well, hey, Shorties. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. We do have another live coming up in we pushed it back by just a little bit, 15. I might start it early. I'll try to get it as close to half past, whatever hour you're on, 7 minutes from now. I just wanted to say thank you to Shiraz for gifting out 5 memberships, and we saw something we've never seen before. She gifted herself a membership. And then gifted another one to cover her own membership. And then Adam, thank you so much for gifting 5 memberships also, babe. Mwah, love ya. And Amy, thank you so much for your super chat for Bob, which thank you, Bob, for covering everything. And that was Romy's super chat before. Thank you so much. Yes. Thank you. Yes, we are going live with another We Need to Talk episode. It is with Amy Boston. She's here now in the chat with us, and she'll be joining me live on stream, and we're going to be covering the Juliana Nagel and Ryan Nagel testimonies from the Karen Reid trial. Girl, Black Blob what? Black Blob what? Oh, Shari, thank you, gorgeous. Can I play this again? If you haven't already hit the like, please hit the like. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below after the stream has ended. Thanking Bob, sending support to Rick, to Kathy, to Abby and Libby, justice for Abby and Libby. In my opinion, this isn't justice for Abby and Libby, but and it's my opinion. you might feel differently. I don't feel like Rick Allen is the man. I never have. So we've stayed very civil in chat. I really appreciate you all. No one's been hugely, I think my mods booted a couple of people, but that's cool. So without further ado, I'm going to bow out. Thank you so much to Bob and Ali. Thank you, chat, Shorties, gifted memberships. Love your faces. I'll see you in a minute. Oh, and there's a members only stream after the next stream. So if you want to do Camp Shorty all weekend, we're doing it. Tomorrow night at 5 Eastern is Deptford Herd Day 2. So it's a whole weekend of Camp Shorty again. Thank you to my mods, Turd, Ernie, Jess, Adam, Amy, and Amber. Mwah! Love your faces. Peace out, kids.
Our brother, hipster, and dweller, the land pirate radio host, hangs by the Oregon coast. Lisa, our sister, survivor and warrior, Miss Shorty shows care and concern, broadcasting out of Melbourne. Smile. He knew love from 8,000 miles away. 13,000 kilometers, never got it away. Half the world apart, but united in the heart. Both are uniquely complex, bravely seeking what's next. Status quo, but sincere in their beliefs, for us to find our love and peace. They've been streaming for a while, and they know they make us smile. From 8,000 miles away, 13,000 kilometers, never gotten away. Half the world apart, but united in the heart. Both are uniquely complex, bravely seeking what's next.